plant a seed through our Mosaic program. We're just talking about like, how do we create new pipelines, reach new people? And it's like, plant a seed in someone, a young person, that this is an opportunity. Conservation careers exist, that there's opportunities for you to get involved.
Imagine a place where stress fades, fresh air fills your lungs, and adventure awaits around every corner. Welcome to Think Outside, the podcast that inspires you to explore, connect, and embrace the outdoors. Welcome to Think Outside, a podcast of the Pennsylvania Parks and Forest Foundation. I'm your host, Marci Mowery, and today we're talking about the future of Pennsylvania's parks and forests, specifically how younger voices are helping shape that future through the Department of Conservation and Natural Resources NextGen Council. Joining me is Allie Bowling, who's here to share what the council is, why it matters, and what it can teach all of us about caring for the places we share. Allie, welcome to Think Outside.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm really excited to be here with you today.
We're excited to hear about the NextGen Council and some of the work that you've been doing with the Department of Conservation and Natural Resources. Before we begin, can you tell us a little bit about yourself? What first connected you to the outdoors? And
I love that. I love that question. That's always a fun question to answer. I have found working at DCNR, you also have to know your favorite tree, your favorite body of water. These are like common icebreakers.
yes. So we won't ask you your favorite park.
Okay. Yes, that's okay. I've just found that along the way, but I didn't always have them ready. But yeah, so I'm Allie Bowling. I always say like a bowling alley. I married that name. So it's kind of funny. And yeah, I started at DCNR about 3.5 years ago. I started in the policy office as the executive policy specialist. And I recently have taken a new position as the executive advisor for climate and sustainability, which gives me a little bit more of an opportunity to work on sustainability and climate, which has been a large part of my portfolio previously. I've always loved the outdoors. It's always been in me. I have not had the same experience as a lot of people, though. I was raised by a single mom who did not necessarily go to our state parks and forests. She always told me she preferred them all. And so I did not get quite the same exposure as some of my colleagues or friends, but I always knew that I loved animals and I loved kind of the natural world, and it just kind of grew from there. And then working in wildlife rehab gave me this opportunity, and it just snowballed. So yeah, it's been a windy road, but we're here.
Yeah, well, excellent. Well, welcome. Before we dive in, for listeners who may not be familiar with what the DCNR NextGen Council is, can you tell us just a general overview about the council and why it exists?
Yeah, so NextGen was created to ensure that we are hearing the voice of the next generation in the work that DCNR does and is planning to do. And it's a council of about 25 young people from across the Commonwealth. We really try to ensure diversity in who is on the council, from socioeconomic status to racial status to all of these different demographic information, trying to ensure that we're getting a broad perspective. And they really just provide us information on what is the next generation thinking about? What do they want? How are they advising us on kind of the thoughts that the next generation is having around outdoor recreation, climate, DEIB work, that's diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging work, kind of all of these spaces. So that's really what the council was created for.
And I think you touched on an important point in that we oftentimes, when we think of DCNR, we think of parks and forests, but it's conservation. So their mission is larger than just the management of our parks and forests. So the climate action plan, the role of these ecosystems in human health in some ways.
Absolutely. Yeah. It's funny. They've been thinking a lot about kind of these intersections, right, of human health, of different disciplines in conservation work. And it is, we do think about access to state parks and forests. We think about management of state parks and forests, but we do offer grants. And how are we reaching people through those grants? And we do have the geologic survey, and how are people accessing that information? And we have other facets to our work that are really important for us to be thinking about. And so they really help us do that. I should just wanted to mention one of the things about the background of the council members is they're not just conservation people. The members are from multiple disciplines. So we do have somebody who works in the healthcare field. We do have someone who's a patent attorney. We have a lot of different backgrounds coming in. And so we can kind of think about things a little bit differently than kind of traditional conservation backgrounds, people all coming together. So yeah, it's a cool thing.
Yeah, we were thinking along the same lines because I was going to comment on the fact that you said that you were not brought up visiting parks and forests, but you developed through your own passions this connection to wildlife, and that led you into a field of conservation. And we've talked before on this podcast that a conservation ethic in any career is beneficial. You don't have to necessarily work in conservation, but you can work in accounting and be thinking about conservation. You can be a lawyer and be thinking about conservation.
Yeah.
Then you mentioned that council members are in these careers. So maybe we should define the age bracket of council members.
Yes. And so not all are in careers. So I'm so glad you mentioned that. We have a wide range and it is a little bit loose. So we say a priority age because we wanted to keep it open in case somebody younger or older comes in, but it's high school to age 35. So that's really a wide span. We try to keep it pretty representative in each kind of age range. So we have like the high school group, we have like the young career, college, kind of time frame, and then we have kind of mid-career. And so we try to keep it pretty even on kind of that distribution of all of those age groups. But it's really important to hear all those different perspectives as we consider the next generation. And I think at one point, when it first started, I actually kind of started working with the council, inherited it, as I say, in 2022. So I was not there in the original. I think it started in 2021. But I think we had a middle schooler. So there is opportunity, and she was wonderful. So there's just opportunity for young people to get involved, get engaged, and really help shape DCNR in the future.
Amazing. If we had been a fly in the wall at the point when the NextGen Council was formed, what were some of the conversations that were happening that created this vision for the council?
Yeah, so I really have to commend Lauren Imgrind who was a previous DCNR deputy secretary. She really, I think, had the vision for NextGen. I was not actually at DCNR when it started. And so I was not there. But when I inherited it, I got the sense that DCNR's mission includes the next generation. It's to conserve and sustain Pennsylvania's natural resources for current and future generations' use and enjoyment. And so when we think about what is future generations' use and enjoyment, I think we should talk to them. And so that's why they were, we should hear from them. And I think that's where the idea really started and to really think about, young people are not often heard in these spaces. And I have found that I think it's just a lack of not knowing how to get involved, where to get involved, when to get involved. It's not for a lack of interest or desire, but knowing where they belong. And so I think this really is an opportunity for us to say, hey, we want to prioritize how do we get these voices heard here? How do we want to elevate them? And it really blossomed from there.
I'd recently had an opportunity to talk with some of the members of the council, and a very impressive group of people.
Yes. Yeah.
So have you found that the way that the younger people connect to the outdoors is different than past generations? And what can we learn from that?
Yeah, that's a really interesting question. I do think that there are differences. Technology is different, right? And it is going to be such a key player in our future, right? Considering AI and how that's going to impact, the work that DCNR does, the work that the council members will do throughout their career. There's this interface of technology and wanting access to technology when outdoors. And so, yeah, I do think that there are differences. I think there's also differences in approach to things. So we talked about that holistic approach, how do we conserve land while considering housing crisis, right? How do we really balance this energy demand, with our conservation of land, and then the housing, and then the childcare crisis, and like how can conservation kind of play into these more complex, and then, no, I shouldn't say more complex, but other complex issues, and really how do they tie together, and how do we look at that, not just through a conservation lens, but through a person lens. So we actually had a project within the council. We're just working on a project for the 30-year vision of DCNR, because DCNR just celebrated its 30th anniversary.
Mm-hmm.
And so we thought it would be really interesting to understand, where does the next gen see DCNR going? And that's a really hard question given we don't know for the next year. Yeah. Yes. But I think that they kind of were thinking about, how do we face some of these huge problems that we have right now? And how does conservation play into that? And they really leaned on the idea of community, right? And like, how do we show up in community spaces? How do we really think about the people aspect to conservation? That way we can educate people on the importance around health, around wildlife, and that impacts on people, and all these interconnected issues, but really at a community level, because not every community is the same. And conservation can be an answer to a lot of community issues, but we have to understand what the issues are in the community and approach them through a conservation lens. And so if there is a lack of housing, we have to understand that. We have to understand, okay, where is the best place for these houses to go? Where is the best and most important places to conserve land, so we can all kind of compromise on these spaces? And then when we build a house, how do we make it as sustainable as possible so that we protect our natural resources? And so it's kind of taking a new approach, I think, in some ways, to kind of some of these issues.
They sound like some pretty deep and meaningful conversations.
Yeah. Yes, I was very impressed by the 30-year vision conversations. It was really enlightening, and it was great conversation.
So once you have a conversation like that, how do you take that back to DCNR and to decision makers to have those voices heard outside of the council itself?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I want to talk through the process of how NextGen works a little bit, and then I'll kind of touch on that 30-year vision. So we as a council generally work on what I call projects. And then there'll be like project committees. And so we will have a DCNR employee, or that's kind of how it's functioned previously, but other external partners come in and talk about a topic. And a project has kind of been figured out around that topic usually. So for example, the 30-year vision. We had an idea that, okay, we wanted NextGen to come up with a 30-year vision. Who at DCNR could help advise them on this project and work with them? Give them some background knowledge on the past 30 years.
Okay.
Give them some context for how DCNR is thinking, and then they can kind of take it from there and work on a project. Because NextGen is people who haven't necessarily worked in government, haven't worked within DCNR. And so it's really important to give them context and understanding of the topic before a project starts. So once they have kind of this context, they have a presentation at their quarterly meeting about a topic, they learn about it, then they take it and work with a DCNR staff member or partner on that topic. So they worked with Preston Leslie, who's the senior advisor for DCNR, and they worked on the 30-year vision with her for a couple of months, and really tried to flush it out. Like, okay, here's our ideas, bringing in her knowledge and context of DCNR. How do we kind of create this vision? And so they worked together. And then they meet monthly. So that was the second month. The third month, then they worked on their own and worked through the project and created a PowerPoint. And then they presented it to our senior leaders at DCNR and in a senior staff meeting. So they had this opportunity to kind of share their ideas that way. Not every project is like that, I will say. It just depends on what they're doing. So they've also provided insight to recommendations on engagement of our grantees. And so they worked with the Bureau of Recreation and Conservation to kind of understand what is the grant program, how does it function. Then they took the current guidelines and thought about what is the next generation. How would you approach the next generation? What is it that they want out of this engagement? And then they figured out how to communicate that to BRC, then their kind of ideas and everything. So I will say we do have a facilitator, Kelly McGinley with Function and Flow, and she is amazing. And she helps us navigate how to communicate between the council and DCNR staff. But yeah, so it just really depends on the project, but there's lots of opportunity for them to really showcase their work within the agency and externally.
Sounds like they're doing a lot of very deep thinking.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
So I'm curious, we oftentimes on the Think Outside podcast, the topic of access comes up. So is the Next Generation Council approaching the idea of removing barriers to outdoor recreation and barriers to conservation?
Yes. Actually, we were doing some planning at the last quarterly meeting last week and thinking about what is Next Gen, what to kind of focus on. And this came up. And it's something that has kind of come up previously, but it's interesting. We think about access from a lot of different perspectives, and we're trying to narrow in how we want to approach it. There's a lot of barriers for the next generation to access our natural resources, from transportation to people with disabilities not feeling welcome in certain spaces or having the opportunities as other people. And so we really were thinking about how do we approach this. And again, we did go back to thinking about the community level and maybe really looking at a community that has a lot of challenges in accessing natural resources that we know. So we want to look at some communities that there are concerns around access. So we know have not necessarily been represented in our visitorship and our grantee program, and kind of take a closer look to understand maybe why. And then could there be some recommendations given to kind of solve some of those barriers? So we were talking about transportation. Is there an opportunity to look to see, does a bus route in a local community pass by a state park or forest? And how do we then communicate that to community members? DCNR's NextGen Advisory Council is statewide. So much as we want to look at a community, we then have to extrapolate that to something bigger, because it's really not just about a work in a specific community, but it's about statewide. But I think it's important for us to maybe look through the lens of like, how are the barriers impacting the next generation's access? And then kind of figure out how to solve that on a bigger level. Does that make sense?
It does. And it makes me wonder if there's any thought of like taking a community and piloting something in a community that can then be, as you said, extrapolated to other communities across the Commonwealth. Every community, as we know, is very different, but there are some common themes that if you can showcase solutions, other communities might either be inspired to take that step or to develop a better understanding of what their own barriers are.
Yeah, absolutely. And even if we can come up with a methodology for how we looked at some of this work, and then that could be extrapolated. It's pretty foundational. Like, we have not figured out what this looks like exactly. And so this is just some ideas that had come up last week. And so some things that we're thinking about. But we have some interesting perspectives on the council that are really kind of bringing out some of these topics. Also thinking about camps, summer camps for kids and for kids with disabilities, and how can the kids with disabilities access the summer camps, and if they have to have a parent present, how does that play into that? Is that possible? Do we do that? So really kind of thinking about how do we approach this already, and then is there any opportunity for improvement?
I'll be curious to hear what you find, because that's the foundation really has a strong focus on removing barriers and creating belonging and improving access.
Yeah.
So if you have any good findings that we might be able to help you implement, please let us know.
Absolutely. And we are thinking about how to raise the voice of NextGen. That is actually a project group right now, and they're thinking about how do we kind of elevate NextGen and share the messages that we're finding and the information we're finding. And so we're thinking about that. NextGen is still relatively new. I mean, it's only, I guess, 4 years old, 5 years old. And so it's still kind of figuring itself out. And so not the concept of NextGen is not new. I should say that. But the NextGen Advisory Council is new. And so there's a lot of trial and error in the beginning. And so we actually developed a new project process within the council. So council members can create projects on their own, not necessarily just DCNR, having an issue and bringing it to them, but like creating a project, vetting it within the council. How does that kind of function? They've created a process for that. So it's just kind of getting some of these things up and running and then figuring out communication channels out. So that's where we're at right now.
Have you noticed, or has there been any conversation about other agencies within state government of taking this approach? Is it serving as a model?
We have been approached by other agencies interested in a NextGen council, but I have not heard of any doing it yet. I hope that it becomes a model. I will say that Governor Shapiro did create a commission for next generation engagement when he came in. So that is another opportunity for agencies to kind of lean on that commission for perspective. We have teamed up with them. Last year, we did events around the Commonwealth for Earth Day, really trying to bring Earth Day back to the next generation. That's where it started. Not that we hope everybody participates. So I just want to be clear. We hope everyone participates. But we really want to see an engagement from the next generation on Earth Day, the advocacy, the work on the ground, the volunteerism. Like, how do we engage the next generation on this exciting day? And so we had events across the Commonwealth in each region that a NextGen member, either DCNR's NextGen Advisory Council, the Commission on Next Generation Engagement, Outdoor Corps was a partner, and then the Youth Council for Hunting, Fishing, and Conservation was also a partner. So we got all the youth councils together and tried to really showcase, hey, we're going to have a young person here. Come out, meet us. We want to connect with you. And so that was the first year of doing that. And so it was a great opportunity. And we want to kind of continue that annually and grow it. I say it was a soft launch year because we thought of it like in January and it was in April. So we had to figure all the details there. But yeah, we want to try to think through like, how do we grow that? How do we really get that engagement across the Commonwealth?
Your NextGen Council is a set number of people, but you also are now overseeing a program that we share a name called Think Outside. And that's another way for the next generation to get involved. Would you like to take a few minutes to talk about DCNR's Think Outside program?
Yeah, so thank you. Yeah, DCNR's Think Outside program is really focused on students in higher education being able to access DCNR staff, DCNR's land, when thinking about doing projects. When thinking about, are they doing a capstone? Could they do research on DCNR land? Are they thinking about doing a research paper around park rangers? How can we connect them to DCNR staff? So it's really thinking about how are we connecting with these institutions of higher education and the students in them. And so I think there's a lot of opportunity to grow the Think Outside program, to let students know that it's available to them. I just started working on it about 2 weeks ago. So I am still learning it myself, but I just see that there's a lot of potential to, again, connect with the next generation. I hope that once we kind of establish it even further in the higher education programs, could we then think about high schools and middle schools and thinking about some other educational opportunities? Absolutely. And we do those programs already, but how can we connect with Think Outside? But right now, we're really focused on kind of that higher education perspective and how can we engage students in those situations. So I think there's a lot of opportunity there. I did want to briefly talk about how people can engage with the Next Generation Advisory Council.
That was my next question. So perfect segue.
Okay, awesome. So the Next Generation Advisory Council, or NextGen, we have a recruiting process, and it starts in July usually. And so with an application, person within the Commonwealth from high school to 35 can apply to be a NextGen member. on our DCNR website. You can just Google NextGen DCNR, our webpage will pop up, and you can apply to be on the council, generally in the month of July.
We'll add the link to the show.
Okay, perfect.
So people can go right to the link.
Awesome. Thank you. So people can go right to the link and they can apply. And once you apply, it's really important. I just want to know, it's really important when you're applying to fill out the question, the short answer question that we have available on the application, because that is the main thing we look at when we score applicants. We actually have a process where we try to create as little bias as possible when looking at NextGen applications. So we have a scoring system where we have a DCNR staff member score, we have a NextGen member score, and then we have a council facilitator score. Each application, they get an average score. We don't look at kind of this information that would possibly change your perspective on how someone answers a short answer question, like why is recreation and conservation really important to you, for example. So that way we can then really assess each individual person through the lens of who they are. And so we do this scoring process. And then at the end, we look to see, okay, where did everybody fall in the scoring process? And then we kind of bring in some more information to make sure we're representative of the full Commonwealth. But we really pride ourselves that this is an open opportunity for all people. We want to make sure that people who maybe haven't had the opportunities in conservation have an opportunity here. People who may have not felt welcome before feel welcome here. We don't want people to think that, oh, I haven't had an experience in conservation, so I can't be a NextGen member. That's not true. You absolutely can be. We welcome it. We want new perspectives. So if you have any questions, I'm always available. I am a chatty person, so feel free. Anybody can reach out to me and Allie Bowling, abowling@pa.gov, and ask me about NextGen. I'm always happy to talk and help people kind of think about where they could fit in. But
so that leads into a question. I mean, you have these applicants. Obviously, not everybody is chosen because you have a set number of people. What happens if somebody applies and they aren't chosen?
Yeah, that's a great question. And we do have a lot of applicants. I was pretty surprised our first year kind of going through this process. We had over 120 applicants. So we do have a lot of people interested, but that does lend itself to what's next for a lot of young people who are interested in engaging with DCNR. And there's a lot of opportunities. And so when we send out an email saying, we're sorry you were not selected, we offer other opportunities for NextGen to get involved. So we mentioned PPFF, right? And like all the volunteer opportunities with the friends groups, join a friends group. You're welcome here and you can get engaged that way. We offer the Youth Council for Hunting, Fishing, and Conservation, which is also run through DCNR. They have a council specifically for high school students. So we have that opportunity. We have the Outdoor Corps, and there's a lot of opportunity for young people there. So we really try to kind of build in other opportunities for young people to engage with DCNR that isn't just through NextGen, because there's room for all of us. And if anybody ever has any questions on how do you get involved, if it's not NextGen, what is it? There's a lot of people here to help, myself included. I know you, Marci, are happy to help young people get engaged. So there's a lot of opportunity for young people. We just got to figure out the right fit for everyone.
So what I'm hearing is when you're applying, don't be discouraged because that you may not get in, but do apply if you're interested because you might be pointed to another opportunity.
Yes.
But focus on the question. Make sure that you're answering the question because that's key.
That is key. That is really the foundation for a score when you're applying.
Yeah. The other thing that I heard was there are a lot of opportunities for the next generation to get involved. There are internships within the Department of Conservation and Natural Resources. We'll put a link in the show notes to that. There is the NextGen Council. There is the Think Outside program that DCNR runs, and there is the Pennsylvania Outdoor Corps. So if you are a young person, if you are under the age of 35, is how we're defining it right now, there are a lot of opportunities, and we'll try to put all of those in the show notes to encourage you to explore those and perhaps apply. if you are interested, or
Yes.
if maybe you share that information with a young person in your life.
I love that. And we were just talking yesterday, plant a seed, right? Through our Mosaic program, we are just talking about like, how do we create new pipelines, reach new people? And it's like, plant a seed in someone, a young person, that this is an opportunity. Conservation careers exist, that there's opportunities for you to get involved through all the things that you just listed. And other organizations too. I mean, just from my perspective and how I got into this career, which we talked about in the beginning, is through volunteering with a local Audubon chapter. Our local Audubon in Harrisburg area, Appalachian Audubon Society, has a youth program, that committee that focuses on how to get young people involved. And so it doesn't necessarily even have to be directly connected to DCNR. You can volunteer in a local organization and then meet people and network and go from there. But yeah, there's a lot of opportunities for young people.
Yeah. And I smile, Allie, because I used to be a high school educator, and part of my path to shifting careers was to volunteer with the Appalachian Audubon, and then I was hired by Audubon, and then I've been in this position. So I do agree that volunteering is a great way, not just to develop your skills, but to build your network.
Yes. Yes, absolutely. I do recognize that is not available to everyone. And I think that that's why the Outdoor Corps is so amazing, because there's an opportunity to have a financial incentive for being in conservation. You can earn money. And so I think that is a great opportunity. But if people can volunteer, I do recommend it.
Yeah. Or, there are many nonprofits that work in the conservation arena who have summer internships or internships throughout the year. So that's another opportunity.
Absolutely. And students can have work-study programs. So that's actually how I got involved in the Wildlife Rehabilitation Center, is that I was a work-study student. I needed to work while going to college, and they were on the list of places that I could work. And I started doing that and then got hired on for an internship in the summer. And then it kind of built from there into management roles. So it really started with this connection with a university and kind of growing it from there. So there's just a lot of ways.
There are a lot of paths.
For everyone. Yeah.
Well, Allie, thank you so much for joining us, and thank you for the work that you're doing. And congratulations on your new role within the Department of Conservation and Natural Resources. We look forward to hearing from you again and to working with you.
Yes, I appreciate that. I'm excited. Thank you so much. And yeah, I'm just grateful to share this information and be a part of this. So thank you.
Yes, and I'll make sure to put all the links in the show notes so that people can find out more information about the various things that you discussed.
Perfect. Really appreciate it. Thanks.
Thank you for listening to Think Outside, where every episode invites you to discover new places, build confidence, and find inspiration in nature. Love the show? Subscribe for more inspiration, share with a fellow explorer, and let's keep thinking outside together. For more resources and inspiration, visit thinkoutsidepodcast.org.